Hi, I'm Carole Owens, and this is Stockbridge Updates. You know, when Stockbridge Updates was founded 6 years ago now, our commitment was to transparency. Our commitment was helping folks learn about local government and how it works. So two things are very happy for me. One is that we're doing this little series and that folks are noticing and I'm getting response and they're thanking us. How does local government work? But secondly, I'm so thrilled. Stockbridge Town Administrator Michael Canales has jumped on board and he has printed an article in the Edge explaining all the projects that he has underway. And tonight at the select board meeting, he's going to bring in town council, and I hope they're going to answer questions. I hope they're going to open up public comment, but even if it's just kind of a lecture on how certain things work, it'll be informative. And Michael, thank you. It's a lot of fun when you start something. And heaven knows I started this with a letter to the Edge and then a follow-up in my editorial in the Stockbridge Updates. It's so nice when other people jump on board and you're not just standing out there alone. So thank you, Michael Canales. Thank you, Donna Brewer, our town council. And now to our segment on how local government works. I'm so delighted to welcome back town council Jeremia Pollard and, in my opinion, the most popular select board member around, Bob Jones. Hi, gentlemen. That's okay. I embarrass all my guests. We were talking before the show, the three of us, and I think where we'll start, Jeremiah, how do you handle executive sessions? And start from the beginning. Who actually writes the announcement? Is there a legal indication?
It's typically whoever is in charge of human resources, which is the administrator or town manager, if they've been appointed in the town. And an executive session has to cite one of the exceptions in the open meeting law. So a good thing to know is that the presumption is meetings are to be held in public, open meetings. The executive session is an exception to that, an allowed exception. It's not a required exception. I think I talked about with this a bit with you last time. You don't have to go in executive session. So in some instances where we've planned, not in Lee, but in some of my other towns, where we have gone ahead and indicated we wanted to go in executive session, and it's an employee matter, and the employee has said we don't want to be in executive session, we don't even do it. But if you're not in communication beforehand, the process would be to send a letter to an employee or an official. It's not just employees. You can go in executive session for officials too, if there's complaints.
Let me interrupt. Also for contracts.
For contracts, yeah.
For licenses.
And you want to be in executive session for contracts. So if you're collective bargaining, it's protocol. So the executive session for contracting, for working with the union to come up with a collective bargaining agreement, that's one of the exceptions. They go on and on, but if you...
So there are a number of them.
There are a number of them. If you go in executive session, you send a letter saying, this is the exception we're going to do, and that's how you put it in the meeting. So, for example, if I'm going to talk to the select board, which I'm gonna tonight in Lee, we'll put in the executive session that we're going to discuss litigation strategy, and that's all it says. And that's an interesting exception because when there's no reason for an executive session anymore, those minutes are released.
Oh my.
But when you're dealing with counsel, if the board is meeting with an attorney, my position, I don't know if all the other town councils agree with me, is that never becomes a public record because on top of the executive privilege is the attorney-client privilege. So that my discussions with the board are also subject to the attorney-client privilege. And without waiver, those aren't disclosed.
Now, with an employment issue, you can also cite a section in the law or the whole law, or how does that go?
The employment, you have to cite so much of what's going to be on the table. So if it's going to be a potential termination, the notice has to say that.
I see.
So whatever you're going to discuss, generally, it needs to be announced in the notice.
And you know, Bob, I certainly hope we all respect the law and operate within it. But Jeremiah's a lawyer, you're a politician. What are
It's a dirty word.
No, not for good politicians. Now, when you look at the listing, what are your considerations?
My considerations are, as you say, first and foremost, that we're following the law. But I'm also considered if it's a personnel issue, I want the employee protected as well. I want the town protected. But I think it's important that the voters, the people who put us in office, are aware that there is an issue. And there may be a way to discuss that outside of a meeting without violating any of those protocols. I mean, there is some wiggle room, and these are not rigid mandates, but we do have some leeway in how it is said.
Yeah, and considering the feelings and position of different people would come into right.
Absolutely.
I understand. Another issue that I think interests people is the relationship between public comment, communication between voters and representatives, and especially if there's a contentious issue. So from a legal side, is there any particular consideration when you can reason that the issue is going to be contentious?
From a pure perspective, contentious, non-contentious, doesn't really matter, but the practicalities of it are, when you're dealing with something that is a hot item, you're gonna be dealing with a level of participation that is always going to change the nature of the meeting.
It's going to be greater.
It's going to be harder to take the PCB issue that we dealt with for years. Those meetings were tough. They were really tough. The town meetings were tough. We were able to get through it by doing through patience, long meetings, and making sure everyone had a say.
Yeah.
Those meetings, if someone feels like they're disenfranchised, they can become, to put it euphemistically, unruly. And we were on the brink of that a few times, and it happens in towns. It's not everything we do there's a mistake sometimes that people make that everything that we do is put to a vote to the town. It's not, and we can't. But so sometimes the result that you're looking for is unavoidably going to create a certain amount of distress in the people who oppose a project or whatever it is. But it is important for everyone to get a say, and oftentimes you'll find, like for special permits and zoning issues, a lot of what the public brings to the table is voluntarily incorporated in permits, even when it's not required legally. And that's because people who are partnering with the town to do a project or whatever understand the importance of hearing the voices at the table.
You know, what I'm hearing, Bob, and, tell me if I'm right, is that whatever the legal mandates are on an equal par with what the humanitarian and political considerations are.
Well, I consider them to be equally important, for sure. Remember, the bylaws in a town are voted at town meeting by the voters. So they're laws not that the select board crafted or the planning board. These are bylaws that were approved by town meeting. And so in the aftermath, when some project comes forward and it meets all of the mandates of the bylaw, you still have people coming forward and saying, I don't like this project. I just don't like it. And so my take is when the project comes forward, yes, I want to hear all the details of the project, but I also want to hear from my constituents, my neighbors, my family, my friends, their take on the project, because that's when the dialogue begins, as what Jeremiah alluded to. That's when the dialogue begins. You have the law, and then you have people wanting to work it out, to be neighbors. Yes, people have rights, but people are willing to make concessions, and that's generally how you come to a successful conclusion.
But it seems to me then that makes the whole all the decisions around communication so important, because allowing communication is how you make the space for consensus.
Well,
if you shut people up, you can say, all right, everybody shut up, I'm doing it my way.
Well, that's it. We're a democratic republic. We're a representative form of government. How do you know what to represent if you can't talk to the people who put you into office? And that was one of the rubs with the rest of the river agreement. You had a representative from each of 5 towns with one attorney in a room deciding on policy for the Housatonic River, and the tens of thousands of people that live in the river corridor had no access to that conversation.
You know, Jeremiah, I've noticed, and I think it's logical, really, that people who don't like the outcome or fear they're not going to like the outcome often think that the process is being jerry-rigged. You know, for example, they'll say, let's go back to town meeting for a minute. Some people will say, oh, yeah, sure. My issue is the last one on the town meeting agenda. And the issues that the powers that be want to see passed are higher up on the agenda. That's a manipulation. Or they'll say, I thought we voted that down at town meeting, and oh my gosh, now it's happening. How is that? Can you explain a little bit? I mean, the town meeting, the people are the legislature. Money isn't spent without their approval. They have control, as Bob just mentioned, over what the bylaws are. The people have power. But are there other things to consider? Do the elected officials also have power to determine? They're the executive branch. How does that work? That's important.
Yeah, the select board, particularly in towns where the select board acts as a special permit granting authority, have a tremendous amount of power, because they're going to decide whether, and Lee's had kind of a hybrid for planning. A lot of it's with the planning board, but some of the special permits lie with the select board, and that does not require. If the bylaws have been amended to grant that power to the select board or the planning board, there's 3 types of uses in the town, right? There's by right, you can do it. The zoning says you can do it. There's in between, which is a special permit, and then the third is you just can't do it. That's where I'd say the voters, the citizen legislators, have the greatest power, because any of them, whether the select board wants it or the planning board wants it, can, if it's a lawful bylaw, can say we're not doing that in the town, period. And they can require that with 10 voters at the annual town meeting.
The power of 10.
And or you can require a special town meeting, and with it's a certain percentage or 200 signatures. So you could call a town meeting in the middle of the summer if you thought something was important enough.
So 200 signatures for the citizens to call a town meeting because they think some issue is important enough to require that. But there's also the power of 10, which has to do with an agenda item on the warrant. So could you explain the power of 10?
So that's a citizen's petition. which we see is becoming, you see more and more often, because sometimes that's just done. People just put it on the town meeting. In Lee, you can go to the select board and barring something outrageous, they're going to put it on. They'll put it before the town. They'll say we were asked to put this on, and they'll put it on. But if the select board is not willing to do that, you still have the authority. As you know, I can draft a warrant article to see if the town will,
consider this.
See if the town will. One that I've seen recently is they don't want anything on the village green. They don't want no more monuments, things. Just they want the green. They don't want anything added.
No signs.
Nothing, and that's the tricky part, because the article has to be constitutional, which means it can't be subject. It can't be subject matter directed. So you can't pick something you don't want to see in just that. It has to be content neutral to pass muster. But yeah, anyone can do that. That's the power of 10, is really just another way of saying 10 verified signatures is a good idea to get more than 10, because the clerk has to verify them and put an article on the town meeting warrant.
Right, for the people to decide, even if your representatives didn't think that it was necessary.
Yeah, it mandates the conversation.
Now,
you can do it in the state too. That's how because the referendum for chapter 94G or whatever it is for the marijuana, the cannabis.
Yes, that's right.
That was a referendum, and the state, one could say, or I will say, took too long dealing with it, because then it ended up being a citizen referendum, and now the state has had to, Humpty Dumpty it by tickling the law to make it work. So that's one of the few referendum laws that's been amended by the legislature in the state.
But sometimes, Bob, and I know everybody has your telephone number. You lead an interesting life. And that's because you really feel it's part of the job to be available to the voters.
I do.
Yeah. But sometimes people don't know where to go. So they just come to a select board member and say, do something about this. Now, how do you sort that out for them?
Well, usually if it's just a question about what's the town doing about this or that, I'll answer for them. If they have something specific they want brought forward, I'll say, go see Chris Britton. He's the town administrator. He's usually able to address questions like that. Or I'll say, or you can come to public speak time at the select board meeting.
And you have that first on the agenda. Is that right?
We do. We approve or make amendments to minutes first, and then we have public speak time.
So it's the first active agenda.
Yes,
yeah.
Right.
So that makes people feel they were glad they came.
Well, and the door's always open, and people know that. So you have that. And we also, on each agenda item, at the end of our discussion or deliberation, or if we're talking with an applicant or something like that, we say, does anybody in the public have any questions or comments?
Right.
And sometimes they're there, they come to the podium, or they may be on Zoom, they put their hand up, and the conversation continues.
Jeremiah, legally,
Yep.
if I'm attending a select board meeting, I'm attending a planning board meeting, I have a copy of the agenda, and my comment, the comment I want to make, is in response to one of the agenda items. Now, as I understand it, that's always allowed. That sort of can't be precluded.
Yeah, if you're at a public hearing, because you're at it's a hearing. So.
But But what about if it's a meeting? What about if it's a conservation commission, planning board, select board, just a meeting? But I want to comment on an agenda item versus I want to make up the subject I'm talking about, so to speak. It's not on the agenda. That would be public comment because it's not on the agenda. But then if it is on the agenda, can I be precluded from talking?
That's not an easy question to answer. So I'll start with the first principle of running a meeting, which is the meeting's run by the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So a chair has the ability to cut off debate. So you can always end up in a situation where you wanted to say something and you didn't say anything. Now on the other end of the spectrum is not allowing anyone to say anything. And that actually can happen. I'll give you an example. If someone is, let's say we were talking about the executive session where you're dealing with an employee matter, and you're bringing an employee in, and it's a sensitive matter, and they say, I want an open hearing. I want to be in public. Okay, you're in public. You have a right to a representative. That representative can be present, and they do not have the right to speak. Their own representative doesn't have the right to speak. Because at the end of the day, it's like any other employment relationship. You're dealing with an employee. And otherwise, someone could just stack the room and batter the board for taking adverse employment reaction. So I've done those meetings where there's been no public comment. If you're dealing with something like a special permit or anything like that, you better let the public talk because it's on the agenda. And if you shut off debate, you're going to have a problem because people want to talk about whether it's harmonious with the town's neighborhood or the character of the town, whether something's going to be built. And so that should be a robust public debate. It really depends on what you're talking about and what's on the agenda. If it's something that involves a public hearing, yeah, people need to be able to say their piece on the agenda item.
You mentioned Chris Britton before, and Chris has been on the show, and he's utterly delightful, and he knows his job so well. There's a funny little thing that you can't quite define, but it's like the attitude of somebody toward the people, or the. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely.
And Chris is like so excellent at that, and I just feel like Michael's sort of stepping up after a while in town and starting to do more of that. I mean, this is great. He's coming forward and he's opening up a meeting and he's writing some things. Now, I'm just so impressed with Chris Britton. And how would you define that element that he has that makes everybody happy that he's your town administrator?
Well, I think that, not only Chris in his job as town administrator, but the select board and hopefully other boards follow the same lead. You can govern from above or you can govern from within. And I think Chris's demeanor, I think his intention is to make people feel comfortable and that they're heard, and that the response is hopefully effective. I mean, we want the same thing, as opposed to we've decided this, and that's the end of it.
From above.
From above.
If you were smarter, you'd agree with us.
Yeah, if you were smarter, you'd agree with us, and we know better, so therefore sit down.
Yeah.
That doesn't fly in Lee. It doesn't. And let me just say, in Lee, I'm really impressed with the voters in Lee. I mean, I got stopped yesterday by somebody who had a business. So what's going on with the new fire EMS police facility? And what about the contractors? How many do you have? When's the bidding? They wanted to know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to know.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
I'm in a completely different field. I was a doctor, and after I retired, now I'm a journalist. But there's an equation, and it's this. I write 106 columns a year, plus I have Stockbridge Updates, which is 24 issues, plus the specials. So I'm writing all the time. And you absolutely cannot do that and please everybody. And I get stopped in the grocery store, or I get a text or an email, and someone disagrees with what I said. And I thought about that years and years, 25 years ago, when I started doing all this. And I have two answers. Thank you so much and I mean this sincerely, for reading anything I wrote and reading it carefully enough so that you formed an opinion. And in this case, I can't make a change or a correction. I stand by what I wrote. Or, thank you so much for taking the time to read what I wrote, for reading it carefully. I appreciate you. I hear what you think the error I made is, and I will make the correction immediately. When I think about how hard I struggled with what to say to people who said, you were wrong in what you wrote, is whether or not you're willing to hear that. And I had to first deal with myself and say, not only am I willing to hear that, I'm required to hear that. It's part of my responsibility. And it always seemed to me, Bob, that you and I held that same feeling. And, you know, you say one of the elements is you're not commanding from above, you know, but there's more to it. Talk a little bit more about that, because I think you're like the expert, and I think that's why nobody even bothers to run against you, and you get 80% of the vote.
Well, I think it's more, I'm genuinely interested. If somebody has a question or a comment, or if they think that I'm wrong, I'm genuinely interested in hearing what that opinion is. And I mean, I could possibly end up agreeing with that person. You know, I'm not the last word on anything until I have. There are three of us. I'm one vote out of three, but we all travel in some of the same circles, but also different circles, and we all come together and say, you know, what are you hearing on this? What are you hearing on this? And we try to come up with, again, with what the general consensus is on anything, because without that, I'm on a desert island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we're out of time, and I just want to thank these fellows for joining me and talking about how local government works. And before I give each of them the opportunity for a closing thought, I just want to say that, you know what? I started this How Local Government Works saying, I don't believe that people don't care enough. I believe they don't know enough. And we're going to try to get as much information out there as we can so people will be comfortable being involved in local government. But you know what I'm learning today? They do know enough. They know what the golden rule is. They know what decent response is. They know what an open heart is. And if you bring that into government, it's going to work out so much better than if you come in and say, I have this power, I have this position, and I'm going to lord it over you. So, guys, closing word, Jeremiah.
I'll leave you with Oscar Wilde. The only thing worse in life than being talked about is not being talked about.
That's great. And I just encourage people to be informed and to jump in and be involved. And we have a lot more in common than we have not in common. And again, consensus is an important thing, but it takes all of us to work on that to succeed.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for being here. And we'll have another installment, and then we're going to have the people's installment. And you get in touch with me if you want to be on the panel. I want to know what you learned and what you still want to know. Okie doke. Thank you.